In this video, I want to do a flip on the denigration of ego and egotism because in a lot of circles, particularly spiritual circles, there's a general sense that the ego is bad, that the ego should be destroyed, the ego is the root of all problems, and is basically a very dirty word. And if we flip that and look at the nature of reality and look at within the nature of reality, what is the most vulnerable, isolated, unhappy, and miserable phenomena that we know of in reality? And I'd suggest that it is the experience of the isolated human ego with loneliness, disconnection, uncertainty, fear, pain, dread of certain past events repeating themselves, relative invisibility. And yet, this framework of human needs, of survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, developing gifts, bringing those gifts into the world and being a part of something bigger than ourselves, that these are individual human needs. And as a general rule, within a cult framework or cultural framework, we rank relatively low at these. So every human being needs these things, but for example, in the United States, we have millions of homeless people, so they're in survival, security, reaching a little bit towards belonging in a framework of shame, which is an isolating experience. And so I think that far from denigrating and shaming the ego, having a tremendous amount of compassion for the state that we find ourselves in, particularly in Western culture, where we have this framework of scientific materialism, which generates a sense of meaninglessness, a sense of disconnection, a fear of death, a fear of the unknown, and in the relative self-absorption of a traumatic culture in which there's a mentality of scarcity. And within that scarcity, the sense that there's not enough survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem for me. And that, to the extent that the cultural framework is sociopathic, that it's not enough to just say, I'm in need. I'm in need of love. I'm in need of a sense of belonging, which is not just a vague state. It's a feeling of being in a circle where everyone's needs within the circle are equal to other people's. So to have a sense of belonging, the fact that I'm in pain or I'm lonely elicits a response within the circle as if that loneliness were, belonged to everyone else in the circle. That's the measure of belonging. And it's not just I'm in physical pain, but this part of me is misunderstood and needs a sense of being understood, and where the response to understand that part is equal to anyone else in the group, that in a chauvinistic culture, that my feminine side is, and its needs for spontaneity, for depth of feeling, for empathy and a sense of affection, of warmth and closeness, that need is honored and responded to as much as my need to make money or something else. If we break it down and look at how many parts of us are there, and how many of those parts have a sense of security and survival, love and belonging, and self-esteem within a given cult environment, that really the human ego is amongst the most impoverished and frightened entities that we know to exist. And that the cult framework that we've built up of mental distinctions and opinions and positions and dogmas and beliefs isolate us further in a way beyond what any other being that we know of, any other consciousness, any other animal on the planet that we're aware of, experiences. Because truly so, with the 60,000 thoughts that the average human being thinks a day, every single person is unique, is distinct on the mental dimension, and is not only distinct, but 90% of those 60,000 thoughts are invisible. Some are invisible to the self, others are invisible to this person, others invisible to this person, some of them invisible to everyone, self included. So there's a sense of distinction combined with invisibility. Now, there's often also this idea that selfishness is a bad thing. And this kind of ties in with being egotistical, that selfishness is a bad thing. And I think that we're not selfish enough. Because if we really look at the mathematics of our human needs, to survive, to feel secure, to have a sense of love and belonging, to have a sense of self-esteem, to exist within a framework of abundance, to develop our personal gifts, to bring them out meaningfully into the community, and to become a part of something bigger than ourselves. And we look at that in the context of viral diseases, the context of economies, the context of technologies, the context of cult and cultures. We realize that it's very difficult for an individual to self-realize, to meet all of their human needs in a circle, in a group, where nobody else is doing that. It's very difficult to meet one's human needs on an unsustainable planet. It's very difficult to meet one's human needs drinking toxic water or developing lung cancer or whatever the case may be. And if we really look at the environment that is most conducive to gracefully and elegantly meeting one's human needs, it is an environment that is sustainable and healthy, that is abundant in a way that everyone is meeting their human needs. Meaning the more relational intelligence exists in a group, the more likely it is for any one member of the group, mathematically speaking, to meet their needs for love and belonging. The more a group has a high degree of consciousness and technology and choice and freedom, the more likely it is that an individual can discover the unique things they are good at and bring those gifts meaningfully into the world that contributes to that field of possibility and abundance. So if one is being incredibly, thoroughly selfish, one actively participates in the creation of a sustainable environment, a healthy and well-educated culture, a system in which everyone has access not just to education as it's currently operated, but to the opportunity to learn in the style of learning that draws out the best of the individual. Some people learn better through listening, some through reading, some through doing, some through observing other people's do. We have different learning styles. And then there are certain skill sets: building a house, learning to cook, doing yoga, learning to think rationally, being creative, being artistic, being able to negotiate win-win interactions, being able to resolve conflict. There are certain skills that bring an incredible return on investment in terms of maximizing sustainable well-being and minimizing unnecessary suffering that are not on our curriculums. And so, in other words, we're not selfish by being self-absorbed, traumatized, relationally illiterate, addictive, self-destructive, and sociopathic. We are, in fact, being incredibly cruel to ourselves, to the environment that determines how easy it is for us to realize our human needs. And so, if we look at the isolated individual as the most pitiable, the most lonely, the most unhappy kind of aspect of reality that we know of, and respond with compassion, with true selfishness, which means investing in the environment that can grow a healthy, sustainable individual predictably, and tracking each individual. How are you doing on survival? What do you need to go from not being sure you'll survive to survival? What kind of environment ensures that everyone can easily migrate from not being sure that they will survive to survival? What kind of environment ensures security of survival? And if we look at things like 7-second hugs, bringing oxytocin into that mix, stabilizing a little bit of brain chemistry, reducing fear, and increasing a sense of empathy. If we look at things such as deep breathing and reflection to escape some of the repetitive, addictive, fear-based thoughts to come back into ourselves. If we look at a transcendent relationship with something bigger than ourselves, the environment, the culture, a sense of God, Goddess, all that is, a mathematical equation of which we are inextricably linked, that no energy in the universe is created or destroyed. It's moving from one shape to another in an evolutionary pattern, and that we are innately part of that equation. That anything that we can do to help that on an individual level is also something that helps that on a collective level. And anything that we can do on a collective level to increase the statistical odds of self-realization, a sense of belonging, and returning our awareness to the equation of which we are inextricably linked, is something that is a kindness. And that as we learn to love the human ego and understand the needs of the human ego, we move through the reptilian self-absorption stage of the traumatized individual, the instinctive individual, the rationalistic sociopath, to the empathic regions of the brain, where when we show competency at creating an environment that is capable of touching each individual, that when we show competence in that environment, in the creation of that environment, we feel more trust because we are more trustworthy as a cult, as a culture, as individuals, as a group. And that this is a good feeling. That to feel sustainably good is to participate sustainably in the environment that makes that possible. That if, in other words, we understand that the direction is not to be unegotistical or unselfish, but rather to fully understand that to be deeply egotistical is to create an environment that grows healthy, well-functioning, sustainably happy individuals. And that to be deeply and fully selfish is to create a world where everyone's healthy, where everyone experiences high degrees of well-being on all the dimensions on which that can be measured, and where that's steadily getting better on a systemic environmental level, such that the natural drive within each individual to feel sustainably better and avoid feeling sustainably worse has a clear pathway to do so in a way that actually realizes what is simultaneously the most selfish and selfless of goals: to participate synergistically, sustainably in a world that makes it easy for us to do what we all want, which is to incrementally improve day by day, year by year, generation by generation, the levels of sustainable self-actualization.